Yo, what is happening, guys? How are you all doing? Welcome back to Rule of Two Review, and today, let's discuss this pretty crazy situation around the Nintendo Switch and the fact that some people's Switches are starting to crack. So this is a crazy and juicy topic that I'm pretty excited to get into because, man, there's a lot going on and a lot to discuss. Now, I do have to say credit to my inspiration for this video comes from a fellow YouTuber and a good buddy of mine, Smash JT. I hope you guys are familiar with him. He's got a pretty sweet up-and-coming YouTube channel. He's been doing really well the last couple of months, and he posted a video this morning on this topic about the cracked Nintendo Switches, which was actually first kind of brought to light via a Nintendo Life article. And so I'm going to link that below. I really recommend that you guys check it out. Like I said, I really like his channel. He breaks down some of how it relates to like the falling Nintendo stocks and all that stuff. And I'm not going to talk about that stuff today because, to be quite honest, I don't really care. That's not interesting to me, and that topic doesn't mean anything to me when I think about the situation. But he does a good job comparing it. So if you're interested in that, please check out my buddy Smash's video on the cracked Nintendo Switches, because that's kind of where I got my idea for wanting to go in my direction with this idea. So like I said, we seem to have a situation where some people, possibly many people, we don't quite yet know the severity of this, but some people seem to be having problems with their Nintendo Switches cracking and breaking, like I said. And also, like I mentioned, it was a Nintendo Life article that seems to really have brought this to light for a lot of people. I will also link that Nintendo Life article below, but the gist of what seems to be going on is more and more people are reporting that their Nintendo Switches that they keep primarily or entirely docked, no surprise there, seem to be having cracks and warps and whatnot. The article is interesting and kind of breaks it down a little bit. The general idea seems to be that really, there's a matter of warping that the Nintendo Switch is going through when you play it, specifically in the dock, because the Switch does get pretty warm, pretty hot actually when you're playing it. It'll warm up in the dock and kind of sit in there like a little bit of a pressure cooker, and then when you stop playing, it cools down, and of course, it's a bunch of metal and plastic, and apparently it kind of expands and detracts and goes through, you know, weeks and months and hours of use. And eventually that can lead to some cracking, so it seems. Now, there are, of course, a good amount of photos that a lot of folks were sending into Nintendo Life and that they were finding via Twitter and whatnot. So you can see evidence of a lot of people who are having their Nintendo Switch basically break and crack on different parts of the frame and the body. A lot of it seems to be kind of along the top or even along the bottom. I have to say, before this came to light in the last couple of days, I also noticed a tweet from Philip, who is from IGN and NVC, of course, friend of the show and a friend of the channel here. And he posted a picture of his own Nintendo Switch that he was having to send to Nintendo, and that thing was like warped and cracked and busted open, I think on both the top and the bottom. You guys should hopefully be looking at photos of it here and of his tweet. And that happened, whatever, a couple of days ago, and then today, this Nintendo Life thing about the cracking Switches from other people, and I was like, whoa, this seems to be almost getting out of hand. Now, of course, for a lot of us, and definitely for myself, I think the first thing many of us might think of is actually the bending and warping situation we had with the Nintendo Switch back when it first launched last year. And that was something, that was a story and a problem people were running into that personally terrified me. Of all the different problems and issues that different pieces of hardware and technology can have and have had in the past, let's not pretend like previous hardware from Sony, Microsoft, or Nintendo haven't had their different levels of very public issues in the past. But that one specifically, I don't know, man, it kind of put the fear of God in me. I did not like that specific idea. It did not sit well with me. And there were plenty of pictures and photos and evidence of that at that time as well, and so maybe a lot of us think, oh, is this kind of the same situation kind of bubbling back up a year later? And in some ways I would say yes, and in some ways I would say no. I think that what happened at that time, it really seems to have subsided. I remember when the Switch first launched, there were two main issues that people would talk about. Some people were saying, oh, it seems like it's kind of scratching my screen a little bit, putting it in and out of the dock. That's not a problem I ever had, but some people had that. And then, of course, the warping thing that I was just talking about, where it would literally, like, bend and kind of warp and bubble, and literally your Switch, like, it would just not be, like, flat. It just wouldn't be flat across. And the pictures were just insane, man. And I believed them. I absolutely believed that some people were running into that issue. And that was a problem, but luckily, both of those problems seemed to go away. Oh, there was a problem with one of the Joy-Cons not syncing properly for people too. I don't remember if it was the left one or the right one, but one of them, I want to say it was the right Joy-Con, wasn't syncing for some people, and Nintendo had to fix that problem as well. So three fairly medium-sized issues when it came to launching brand new hardware back in March last year. But, like, where I was already going with that is that within a few months, all of those stories seem to go away, and we haven't seen any problems like those in a very long time. Now, to me personally, this problem is very similar to the bending situation, but like I said, also different in its own way, because the problem last year was just a bending and a warping, which is definitely no good. Now we're seeing evidence where literally things are cracking, parts are breaking and falling off, and in some cases, like in Philip's photo I showed you, it's just busting open. It's basically just coming apart at the seams for some people. And what I wonder is, again, reminder, those of you who know me know this, newcomers to the channel might not know this, I am not a tech guy, so I'm not going to pretend to get all savvy with the different technical specifications and parts and how these things are put together. That ain't me, man. I don't know that kind of stuff. But what I would guess, as just a longtime game fan, is that this might be sort of the next evolution of the problem that was happening last year with the bending. Where the bending, I think, was definitely a result of how hot the Switch gets, specifically when it's sitting in that dock. And now we might be seeing, like I said, the next level where it's gone from just bending and warping to just busting open and cracking and falling apart for some people. And that is, like I said, terrifying. For me, here's the reason my Switch is in good shape. It's because, honestly, I am a complete freaking anal retentive nutbag when it comes to my technology and the things that I buy. I take care of everything from my game consoles to my TV to my vehicle to my house to everything. I baby stuff. My phone, I baby everything. I buy the best cases you can, all of that good stuff. So when that warping thing started last year, and like I said, it terrified me. I just didn't like the nature of that problem. And I've always felt like my Switch gets really hot when it's being played, whether it's in the dock or in my hand or whatever. I've never really loved the idea that the Switch gets as warm as it does. I understand why it gets warm, and I love the console, so it's not like this huge slight I have against it. But for me, what I started doing probably, I would say about 2 months after the warping situation became public news, I noticed how hot my Switch got, and so I basically set up my Nintendo Switch. It's sitting right down here. I'll have hopefully a little video playing of me showing you what my setup looks like. I have my Switch's dock down here so I can kind of capture footage. It's near my PC, and I've got a fan next to that thing, and anytime I'm playing my Switch in its dock, I've got that fan on high blasting right on top of it, man. I have my own makeshift cooling system for my Nintendo Switch, and it's set up to blow perpendicular with the dock so that it hopefully gets kind of in that little tiny slice between the front and back of the Switch as it's sitting in that dock and on top where I think the fans are the little grates that are on top. So that, long story short, that fan hopefully keeps it cool. And I tell you what, man, you look at my Switch, this baby is in mint condition. It's got the tempered glass that my main man, Miza T, another fellow YouTuber, suggested I get a long time ago. And I've had no issues, no bending, even though this sucker gets really hot. So anyway, when we break this down and kind of try to really come to the nature of this problem and what's going on, what does this possibly mean? What does this possibly mean for Nintendo or for the Switch? Well, it could go one of two ways. Obviously, there's two different ways this could go. This could blow up and become a bigger issue and starts being covered by larger sites and larger mainstream news and media, because right now, it's not. It seems like it's kind of a smaller issue that only a few people are running into, which is very good news. And right now, only Nintendo Life has written the article, and like I said, also the tweet from Philip from IGN. But that's it so far. Now, it could steamroll and more people pick up on it and more people notice the problem and start reporting it and sending it into Nintendo and making tweets and articles and YouTube videos about it. And suddenly bigger sites like IGN, GameSpot, or maybe even large news programs and tech news programs and stuff start covering it. And then we've got a big situation on our hands. Nintendo would have a big situation on their hands. And it would be a huge problem. And it would expose a huge flaw with the Nintendo Switch that Nintendo developed. Or it could become just like the previous issues that happened around the launch and basically just go away. And it's a small subsection of people that are running into some issues. Maybe there are people that take slightly less good care of their Nintendo Switches than others. I mean, I'm just guessing. And so that's where the problem is coming from. And then maybe it just goes away. And really, it's not a long-term issue. And that would be great. And I like to think that that's probably going to happen. That happened before. Like I said, it took a year for anything like this to surface again. So why would it continue to get bigger? But at the same time, maybe it's just taken this long for people's Switches to start getting so hot that they start to crack. So we're just going to have to wait and see. To me, if this blew up any bigger, it would be something akin to the Red Ring of Death. Because if I remember, again, a non-tech head speaking way out of turn here, but I'm going to try to remember. If I remember right, the issue with the Red Ring of Death, I think had something to do with the big brick power supply of the Xbox 360, and it would get so hot that it would break the solder inside of the Xbox 360 because it would get so warm, and once that soldering connection was broke, then you wouldn't be able to you wouldn't be able to just play your system. It just wouldn't work. Something like that. And maybe I'm way off and you guys can yell at me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's something to that effect. But either way, that was a huge problem. And what I like about that situation, or I should say the story about the Red Ring of Death, is that overall, Microsoft overcame it. And it never really hurt their business. I mean, they obviously lost money, but people kept buying 360s. It was a successful console. It had great games. It had a successful run and a great life. And people loved the machine. It's a great console. So it didn't, like, kill the Xbox or kill Microsoft. But it was a big issue for sure at the time. And if this thing blows up to anything bigger, to me, it would feel something like that. And so I don't think it would outright destroy Nintendo or the Switch. But like I said, it would expose a bit of a problem and a flaw with the design of the Nintendo Switch, and I do think it's a shame. I already don't personally like that it gets as hot as it does. I don't like that I feel compelled to have to put a fan on my Nintendo Switch when I'm playing it docked. But that sucker gets so hot, I'm not going to risk it. This costs $300, man. I mean, don't get me wrong. I will proudly say I make pretty good money, so it's not like I would be out of a Switch for all time if it broke. But $300 is a lot of money, man. I spent my hard-earned money on this thing. I want it to last. And so if it's got a possible warping or cracking issue, I'm going to protect it with something as simple as a dumb fan. I also think, as much as I love Nintendo and give them a lot of slack with a lot of the mistakes they make, if this does prove to be a bigger issue, something more akin to a Red Ring of Death, I think Nintendo would deserve to be called out to a pretty high degree here, if that's the case. Again, I'm not really expecting it to be, so I think it's all just going to hopefully blow over. The next coming weeks and months will tell us that. But if it blows up, it's like, yeah, well, Nintendo, you probably didn't do a good job designing the thing. I mean, if the problems from last year would have persisted, I think that would have been true even at that time as well. And I know a lot of people, some of the super extreme Nintendo fans and Nintendo defenders and stuff might be like, oh, no, it's not Nintendo's fault. That's crazy. It's people abusing their Switches and whatever and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, it might be a mix of all things, but I don't think that extreme Nintendo defender territory would qualify if, in fact, this turns out to be an issue that exposes Nintendo's design flaw in the Nintendo Switch. I really don't. Like, they would deserve to be called out, and I hope that they'd have a way to fix it. Right now, I'm sure you can probably send it into Nintendo. If it's under warranty, I believe they're probably fixing it. If it's cracking, I don't know why they wouldn't. If it's outside of warranty, I don't really know. I don't think that they've made any, like, full comment. This is just kind of a new thing that's only popped up in the last day or two, like I said, so I guess we'll have to see. But at the end of the day, in wrapping this up, like I already said, I don't ultimately expect this to become a huge issue. I want to believe that Nintendo's design is going to just hold true to their normal standard, where they design incredible hardware and incredible machines that withstand the greatest of beating up. Like, they're just so good at what they do. They build such solid machines. A couple of outliers are going to happen when you're selling millions of units of a device. And so a couple of outliers isn't a big deal. But if this blows up, then we get into a situation where it's a huge problem. So we're just going to have to see. I just ultimately, I don't know. I guess I'm just curious more than anything. I'm just curious to see what happens. I'm not worried about my Switch because, like I said, I baby it. I've babied it since I've had it, just like I baby everything that I own. But that doesn't mean it wouldn't still be a huge problem if this problem persists for other people. So I want to hear from you guys. Have any of you guys run into issues like the warping from last year or the cracking and the breaking and the bending from kind of right now? This current situation, the screen scratching and stuff, it's kind of whatever. That's old news. Most of us have probably put screen protectors on our Switches. But all the bending and warping and breaking, man, I'm curious if you guys have seen it yourself. Maybe you feel inclined to want to inspect your Switch watching this video and hearing this conversation, and heaven forbid you notice a problem. I hope you don't. I'm sending all the good vibes to all of you guys out there that no one's Switch has any of these problems. But if you see anything on your Switch, or you notice, or you've already had an issue with yours, I'd love to know and hear from you in the comments or on Twitter if you've run into it, so we can kind of start to gauge as a community and as a group really what's going on here and how possibly severe this might really be. So that's what's going on right now. That's what I think of the current situation. It will be interesting to watch this play out over the next few weeks. Maybe we never hear from this again, and it's just a one and done, wham bam, thank you ma'am. I guess we'll just kind of have to see. So that is it for me today. Thanks, of course, always for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Ro2R Review, and I'll catch you next time on another video.